a special meeting of the Guilford Board of Education. This meeting is designed to get public input on the topic of when our high school in particular, but other schools' start times ought to be. And I want to and tonight is not we're not going to have lengthy presentations by anybody connected to the board. This is really to get input from members of the public. But I did think it was useful perhaps to just give a 2-minute summary of how we got here and what we have looked at already. 4 years ago, there were 2 Board of Education members who were physicians, one a pediatrician, and they, along with very respected members of the community, brought a study to the Board of Education by the American Academy of Pediatrics. That study concluded that adolescents, teenagers have a different biology than either younger children or adults, and compelling them to start school at 7:25 in the morning, as we do, is at odds with the physical reality that high school students are simply on a different sleep cycle than others. The Board of Education reviewed the evidence, and specifically numerous peer-reviewed studies. We opened a dialogue with parents and faculty in the community regarding this issue, and we looked at efforts to change start times in other towns. Sometimes those led to changes, and sometimes they didn't. We heard from very diverse groups, including parents at each level of the schools. We sent out a survey to parents, faculty members, and students, the results of which are on our website. We met with interested groups, including athletic coaches, faculty, students, extracurricular advisors, and parents. We retained an outside consultant to see if we could address some of the transportation issues that were presented. What we learned is that, at least for our town, changing start times is an extraordinarily complicated issue. This is due in part to the fact that we are geographically one of the largest towns in the state of Connecticut, almost 60, in the area of 50 square miles, and very long north to south. Our 7 schools are not centrally located. And while start times can be changed with a likely benefit to some students, particularly at the high school, we understand that there could be negative effects on others, either the students themselves from an impact on athletics or on instruction, if they missed classes for sports, work, or extracurriculars, on working parents who need elementary children in school in time to get to work, and on all students who participate in after-school activities, on faculty, and perhaps even on taxpayers. It became clear fairly quickly that we needed to do more work to determine whether the community concurred with that this is a priority, and if so, what the most appropriate way to address it might be. We were at the time very hesitant to propose a solution that would add significantly to the budget due to the pressure on our budget from significant cuts in state aid, including at the time a proposed state budget that would have cut our educational cost sharing by over $3 million, or 5% of our budget. We held a community meeting roughly 3 years ago at which over 100 people attended to gauge community support for the various alternatives, and suffice it to say that meeting was further evidence of a lack of consensus. People were almost evenly divided among those who wanted to move all of our schools back an hour, people who wanted to make no changes at all, and people who wanted some combination of flipping high school with some of the other schools. We then became aware that several other districts had either approved or had tried to implement later start times, and rather than force through a change without adequate investigation or to abandon an idea that might have merit, we asked Dr. Freeman to appoint a task force to look at how other districts had accomplished this and to take a second look, a harder look at how start times could be accomplished here with the least possible disruption. The task force that we appointed included a broad cross-section of persons interested in or affected by the issue, with some who supported changes strongly and some who did not. We also considered more broadly what the goal of later start times was intended to try to accomplish, and that is the physical and mental health of students and potential reductions in anxiety, among other things. We asked Dr. Freeman to take a broader look at this issue and to suggest that there were other improvements separate from start times in areas of homework assignments, grading, substance abuse, electronics use, and others. That work, I'm pleased to say, is continuing. The decision that we made to not move forward with later start times and not drop the idea of possibly moving forward with later start times last year did not make everybody happy. Some thought we should simply proceed with later start times, and they were frustrated with how long and how carefully we've been considering the issue. Some thought that we were wasting time and effort on something that was not that important and that many in the community did not want. Dr. Moore graciously agreed to chair this task force after retiring from the Board of Education, but his service was particularly valuable because of his service on the Board of Education and his familiarity with the complexity of the issue. The task force has met several times and has forwarded to the Board of Education an interim report which has been made available to the public, and I hope everybody here has had a chance to read. That is all that we are considering for the 2018-19 school year. The recommendation of the task force with a slightly later start time for the high school and the elementary schools. There is no other proposal presently on the table. We are very aware that even the limited proposal within the task force interim report will have impacts. There will be both positive and negative. And similarly, not making any change at all will have positive impacts for some and negative impacts for some. What the Board of Education is trying to do right now is to try to balance the benefits and impacts and try to do what we believe is in the best interests of all of the students in the Guilford Public Schools. There is no way to achieve the benefits of a later high school start time without some cost or some impact on someone else, whether to after-school activities, classroom time, or expenses. There are no substantial schedule changes that will either have no costs or no potential adverse consequences. So the question for the Board of Education, and really the question for the Guilford community as a whole, is whether we can obtain the probable benefits of later start times for high school students with acceptable impacts on instruction, athletics, other schools, budgets, faculty, and working parents, or whether those benefits don't outweigh the costs. And that's why we're here, to get information from you as we consider the alternative. We are not here to sell you anything tonight. We are not here to educate you here tonight. We are here to listen to you tonight. This is your evening. We know that there are strong views on this question. You may disagree in whole or in part with people who are your friends, with people who are your neighbors, and people who you respect. And I'd like to remind everybody that we're here for exactly the same reason, and that is because we want the best that we can have for all of the children of the Guilford Public Schools. Now, I'd ask anybody who does have a comment to please come up to the podium here, give us your name and address, and the clerk has asked us to, there's a sign-in sheet up here so that the minutes will accurately reflect your name and your address. Dr. Freeman has an extremely short 8-slide presentation to just summarize the issue before the board today, and that is specifically the report of the interim task force. So I'd ask the interim report of the task force. I'd ask Dr. Freeman to proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Block. So again, very briefly, and not to be repetitive, the Start Time Task Force that was formed earlier this year has met between, I believe, 10 and 12 times. All of the minutes, agendas, and information from our meetings are available on the school website, as well as all of the information that we relied upon. It's all available on the school website. The task force at this time has not reached consensus as a group. We met with the Board of Education at their April 23 meeting and shared 3 suggestions. These are not proposals. This is not a plan. These were 3 broad suggestions that the task force shared. The first was that we continue working towards a start time of 7:55 to be implemented by September of 2019. That is not this coming September. That is pushing this topic off for a year and continuing to work on a broad solution that would allow us to start time at essentially 8 o'clock in the morning. Not for this coming September. That is a farther look down the road. The second suggestion was a look at changing the Guilford High School start time from 7:25 to 7:40 to be implemented in September of 18, this coming September. And the third suggestion is that we continue to strive to find efficiencies in our busing schedule, particularly in the arrival of buses at the high school prior to the beginning of the school day. So if I could very briefly build out on each of those bullets and then show what this might look like. First of all, the first bullet again would have no impact on this coming September. This would mean, in fact, asking the task force to continue working, and at this time, there continues to be no clear road forward. We are not sure what that plan could look like. It might simply include increasing the transportation costs. That is one, and in fact, the most direct way to address this. There has also been conversation in the community about how restructuring the schools could be a route to that start time. I want to be clear. The task force neither suggested nor endorsed that as a possible route towards an earlier start time. That was a suggestion that I individually brought forward as a topic that bears further discussion. There could be other solutions that could fall on this list as well, but that's the first bullet. The second bullet would involve no costs. The suggestion to move the high school start time by 15 minutes would be achieved by reaching into two buckets of time. The first would be reducing passing times at the high school. This would result in a school day that is 5 minutes shorter than it is currently. But I want to be really clear. The time comes from passing time, the time in between the end of one period and the beginning of another period. This change would not affect the time that your high school students spend with their teachers, but it would shorten the day by 5 minutes. The second piece of those 15 minutes would be achieved by sliding all of the schools 10 minutes later into the day, starting 10 minutes earlier in the morning and ending 10 minutes earlier in the afternoon. And the final bullet, later in the afternoon, I apologize. The final bullet was looking for efficiencies in those AM bus arrivals. And I am pleased to announce at this meeting that we have determined that we can achieve 10 minutes in efficiency in the high school runs. So where buses are currently dropping off at the high school as early as 6:50, if the times remained the same, we could push that to 7 o'clock. We have identified 10 minutes that could be achieved. Now that's not start time, but that is sleep time for your children at home that we can achieve by working on those bus routes at the high school. So thinking about the bullets separately is difficult. I have tried to illustrate this for the purpose of this meeting. At the high school, what you're looking at currently is in the column on your left. Our last bell rings at 2:08. We dismiss high school students at 2:08. We would be suggesting moving that to 2:18. So the high school day only moves 10 minutes later into the afternoon. The first bell currently rings at 7:25. That would move to 7:40. So the day would start 15 minutes later, although it only ends 10 minutes later. Drop-off time at the high school is currently 35 minutes before classes start. Adjusting that to 25 minutes, that means the first bus would arrive at the high school at 7:15. Selecting sort of a random student, we have a policy that allows for bus runs as long as 50 minutes. I selected a student with a 30-minute bus run, and that means that your bus pickup time would be at 6:45 in the morning. And this may be a stretch, but assuming a student needs 30 minutes in the morning to wake up, eat, get ready, and get on the bus, that would be a wake-up time of 6:15. That's a fictional child. Your child might require less time. I think most might require more time, but for purposes of illustration, we look at the wake time for a high school student moving from 5:50 to 6:15 under this suggestion. That means you'd be netting 125 minutes of sleep time for a high school student under this scenario. More than 2 hours of sleep in this scenario. Now, what does that look like at the other schools? At a middle school, you would simply be looking at a flat 10-minute push. So where the middle schools now dismiss at 2:40, they'd be dismissing at 2:50. Where the first bell rings at 8 o'clock, it would now be 8:10. Where drop-off occurs at 7:40, that would be 7:50. You see the pickup time is pushed by 10 minutes. And so for our middle school student, our younger adolescents, what you're looking at is that they get 50 additional minutes of sleep spread over a week. Now, we're not suggesting that that's a positive. The number is probably too low, but it's not a negative. To allow our younger adolescents to sleep a little bit later in the morning is certainly not something that we should be overly concerned about. The change is from 2:40 to 2:50. That's an important consideration. And then at the elementaries. Where the elementaries currently dismiss at 3:25, this would be pushing dismissal to 3:35. Where they currently begin instruction at 9, it would be 9:10. You will see that drop-offs at the elementaries are much tighter than at the other schools. The buses drop off just 10 minutes before instruction begins. And you would see that a student who's currently being picked up at 8:20 would be picked up at 8:30. I didn't suggest a wake time because I believe most of our third graders will be awake before 8:20 on their own. We're not suggesting that they gain additional sleep in this plan. and the color's not showing well, but that box is drawn in red. Because we're not suggesting that pushing the elementary schools 50 minutes later into the morning or the afternoon is positive. That, in fact, is a compromise. What we would be looking at under this suggestion is essentially netting 125 minutes a week of sleep for our high school students at the cost of 50 minutes a week at the elementaries. And that is what these three bullets stacked together would look like if the board chose to follow this suggestion for September of this coming year. And that's what the board is here tonight to hear your comments on. So there is no plan to restructure the middle schools for next September. There may never be a plan to restructure the middle schools. There could be something as comprehensive as this, as early as next September, and that's what we're here to listen to your opinions on this evening. Thank you, Mr. Bloss.
Okay, thank you. So I'd like to make just one further comment, and that is that there is nothing on the agenda for us to be voting on this evening. There is not going to be a motion to adopt any of these. We're just here to listen tonight, and we'll move forward with a proposal at some later date that obviously will be publicized. So I'd like to suggest that anybody who wishes to make any comments come up, and I'm not going to. We try to just be reasonable in terms of time limits. I'd ask that if you had 3 or 4 or 5 minutes, let somebody else talk and then come back up maybe, and so we can make sure that anybody who wants to address us can be heard. So please just come on up and give us your name and your address, please.
I'm Donald Cottrell. I live at 9 Garrison Drive. I hope everybody can hear me. I brought a few props. I'm a big supporter of starting the high school later. One of my favorite authors is Daniel Pink. Hopefully a lot of folks recognize this book. It's a behavioral science type book, Drive, bestseller, New York Times. His newest book is called When. And where a lot of other self-help books are sort of how-to books, this is an interesting one. It's a when-to book. It's his newest book. I'm going to read a couple pages. You probably can guess what the topic is. Many school districts from Dobbs Ferry, New York, to Houston, Texas, to Melbourne, Australia, have heeded the evidence and shown impressive results. This is in regards to later high school start times. For example, one study examined 3 years of data on 9,000 students from 8 high schools in Minnesota, Colorado, and Wyoming that had changed their schedules to begin school after 8:35 a.m. At these schools, attendance rose and tardiness declined. Students earned higher grades in core subject areas of math, English, science, and social studies, and improved their performance on state and national standardized tests. Probably worth the Board of Ed noting, too. At one school, the number of car crashes for teen drivers fell by 70% after it pushed its start time from 7:35 to 8:55 a.m. Another study of 30,000 students across 7 states found that 2 years after implementing a later start time, high school graduation rates increased by more than 11%. One review of the start time literature concludes that later start times correspond to improved attendance, less tardiness, and better grades. Equally important, students fare better not just in the classroom, but also in many other domains of their lives. Considerable research finds that delaying school starting times improves motivation, boosts emotional well-being, reduces depression, and lessens impulsivity. The benefits aren't just for high school students, they extend to college students as well. At the United States Air Force Academy, delaying the school day start time by 50 minutes improved academic performance. The later that first period began, the higher the students' grades. In that case, they found correlation. In fact, a study of university students in both the United States and United Kingdom, published in Frontiers in Human Neuroscience, concludes that the optimal start time for most college classes is after 11 a.m. Not what I'm suggesting here. Even the price is right. Also important to note. When an economist studied the Wake Country, North Carolina school system, he found that, quote, a 1-hour delay in start time increases standardized test scores on both math and reading tests by 3 percentile points, end quotes, with the strongest effects on the weakest students. But being an economist, he also calculated the cost-benefit ratio of changing the schedule and concluded that later start times delivered more bang for the educational buck than almost any other initiative available to policymakers, a view echoed by a Brookings Institution analysis. Yet the pleas of the nation's pediatricians and its top public health officials, as well as the experiences of schools that have challenged the status quo, have been largely ignored. Today, fewer than 1 in 5 U.S. middle schools and high schools follow the AAP's recommendation to begin high school after 8:30 a.m. The average start time for American adolescents remains 8:03 a.m., which means that huge numbers of schools start in the 7 a.m. hour. Of course, we know that all too well. Why the resistance? A key reason is that starting later is inconvenient for adults. Administrators must reconfigure bus schedules. Parents might not be able to drop off their kids on the way to work. Teachers must stay later in the afternoon. Coaches might have less time for sports practices. But beneath those excuses is a deeper and equally troubling explanation. We simply don't take issues of when as seriously as we take questions of what. Imagine if schools suffered the same problem wrought by early school start times, stunted learning, and worsening health, but the cause was an airborne virus that was infecting classrooms. Parents would march to the schoolhouse to demand action and quarantine their children at home until the problem was solved. Every school district would snap into action. Now imagine if we could eradicate that virus and protect all those students with an already known, reasonably priced, simply administered vaccine. The change would have already happened. 4 to 5 American school districts, more than 11,000, wouldn't be ignoring the evidence and manufacturing excuses. Doing so would be morally repellent and politically untenable. Parents, teachers, and entire communities wouldn't stand for it. One more paragraph, I promise. The school start time issue isn't new, but because it's a when problem rather than a what problem, such as viruses or terrorism, too many people find it easy to dismiss. What difference can 1 hour possibly make? Ask the 40 and 50-year-olds. Well, for some students, it means the difference between dropping out and completing high school. For others, it's the difference between struggling with academics and mastering math and language courses, which can later affect their likelihood of going to college or finding a good job. In some cases, this small difference in timing could alleviate suffering and even save lives. Starts matter. We can't always control them, but this is one area where we can, and therefore we must. Thank you for your time.
So I actually like the idea that this gentleman had, that if you want to say something while the prior speaker is speaking, if you could come up and sit in one of these chairs so that we don't have a lot of kind of strolling up and down time.
And then pass the sign-in sheet.
And pass the sign, that's a good idea. Thank you, Mr. Sands. And Mr. Kazin, that's a good idea. If you could just pass that backwards to the bench.
I don't imagine I'm going to be getting much applause. I'm concerned that, my name is Eric Haskell. I live at 189 Little Meadow Road. My concern is that what we're considering is not scientific. When you read the data, it doesn't say 7:50 start times is beneficial. It says 8:30 start times. All of the data says that when you read the studies. Now, I'm not saying that 10 minutes isn't good, but is it good? You know, is a little bit of time worth our time, as opposed to what the science says, and the science says 8:30. That being said, it just seems unbelievable to me that we're not considering swapping elementary school and high school. The kids get up earlier. The kids are already up earlier. I don't want my child getting off the bus when somebody is coming home from work tired and exhausted, not paying attention to the road, and it's pitch black out. And my child has to cross Little Meadow Road when he gets off the bus. Yeah, I'm a parent. I'm supposed to be there to grab him off the bus, but I'm watching TV at that point. No, I'm not. I'm just kidding. No, so I'm concerned about that the science is not being considered, and I'm concerned that it seems like there's an obvious solution that the school board doesn't seem to be considering at all. Thank you.
And one thing I think we are not going to do is respond to every single point on the other, but I do want to mention we did look at that in great detail 4 years ago, swapping the elementary schools with the high schools. There was tremendous resistance from high school parents and students and faculty with regard to extracurricular matters and athletics and work. So we did look at that. And also, we were concerned about the start with the elementary kids getting on the bus in the winter in the dark. So we did look at that. It's I mean, listen, they're good ideas. I don't think we're going to hear anything bad here tonight. I really don't. I think the question is going to be, how do we prioritize? How do we balance?
Hi, I'm Barbara Hargraves, and I live at 284 Landon's Way. The data, is great, and it suggests that our high school students are losing sleep. They're under a tremendous amount of stress, and I know that all parents want to see their kids get more sleep. All the studies suggest that the optimum start time is 8 o'clock. Some even suggest 8:30. And I just question the suggestion from the start time task force, or the proposal by the task force, to start the high school time 15 minutes later. It's still only going to be 7:40. I realize that's just 1 year. But I really question whether those 15 minutes are really going to offer our kids the benefit that these studies suggest. And my bigger concern is the elementary kids. I feel that, yeah, it's only 10 minutes. Oh, it's only 10 minutes. But we heard at a recent Board of Ed meeting from elementary school principals that it's a challenge right now to keep these kids alert for instructional time past 3 o'clock. 3 o'clock is pushing it, and now we're suggesting to push their end time to 3:35. And I realize that somebody might be negatively impacted, but I fear for the youngest learners in our district that they are really going to lose out. On top of that, they're going to be getting home, some potentially as late as 4:30. And these are kids that already don't get enough outside time. And what's going to happen then? And I know it's a cost-neutral suggestion to the taxpayers, but I think you need to take into consideration our parents of elementary students who still need to leave their kids at daycare or childcare at the same time, and now are going to be paying for an extra 10 minutes. And sure, it's only 10 minutes, but that's 50 minutes a week. And if you multiply that up by the school year, that is an economic strain for some of our parents. I just question whether 15 minutes this year is, if the inconvenience to our elementary school kids, to their parents, the potential loss of learning is worth the 15 minutes of sleep for the high school students are going to get. I'm not against the high school, changing the high school start time, but I really think we need to do this right. I think we need to do it in one step. The two-step process sounds like it could be beneficial, but you're going to inconvenience parents and students and school and staff and the community 2 times. And I just feel that we should wait as a community and as a Board of Ed and make the change all at once, even if it means waiting another 2 or 3 years, and probably more importantly, even if it means adding a transportation cost to the budget. I feel that making a change that is going to benefit one group of students at the detriment of our youngest learners is not a good decision. So thank you.
Craig Keena, 329 Wilbur's Lane in Guilford. I've been a community pediatrician in Connecticut for over 2 decades, and I'm one of the pediatric medical directors at ProHealth Physicians. There's clear evidence, which people have already commented on, and research surrounding that later school start times benefit our children. That's why in August of 2014, the American Academy of Pediatrics issued a statement policy that middle school and high schools delay the start of classes to 8:30 a.m. or later. Doing so will align school schedules to the biological sleep rhythms of adolescents whose sleep-wake cycles begin to shift up to 2 hours later at the start of puberty. This is not just high school, this is middle school also. I believe Guilford needs to begin to do something. I know this is a very difficult thing, but we need to begin to move the dial towards later school start times for our middle school kids and our high school kids. But I hope that the board will take into mind, I would hope that the ultimate goal, I'm not sure how long it might take, would be to get middle school kids and high school kids in Guilford to not start school before 8:30. Thank you.
I'm Craig Mullett, 146 Tupelo Lane. I'm a parent on the task force, and I'd like to commend the board and the superintendent for the hard work they've taken. I first raised this issue 5 years ago with this board, and I've heard time and again how it's too complicated, we need another task force, we need another way of looking at it, we need another public meeting. And I hear parent comments now, and I understand the frustration with having to do this in phases. But my concern, if we don't move with the change next year, for the next school year in 2018-19, which would benefit students, as Dr. Freeman showed, by 25 minutes a day in the high school, which adds up to 2 hours a week. And it moves the needle enough. There's research out there which shows that a 15-minute change in high school start times before 8 a.m. does improve adolescent health and academic performance. And the Education Commission of the states put out a study, and the conclusion that they came to was that few, if any, educational interventions are so strongly supported by research evidence from so many disciplines and experts in the field. This board has known that for 5 years. They've seen the research. Since then, we've had other school districts in Connecticut that have moved, including one district, Newtown, which is in size actually bigger than we are. And they've been able to figure this out and been able to make some changes. Some of them had to adjust the changes. But I would strongly encourage the board and the community to support the board in making a change this year. And I understand the frustrations from the elementary school parents about a 10-minute slide. We've looked at this a lot, and I think that Dr. Freeman made a good comment that we should almost be called the end force rather than the start force, because the end times are very challenging for high school students. If we start moving those end times too late, it has dramatic impacts on some of their academic and jobs and other things. So it's really a careful balancing act, and I think that the plan that Dr. Freeman presented for a change for 2018-19, which gives 2 hours of additional sleep to the high school students, additional sleep to the middle school students, and a minor inconvenience for elementary students, parents and students, remembering that some who pick up later will be able to drop off slightly later, so there should be a swing and a balance in terms of childcare for some parents. And I think it's a good compromise to be able to make a change in 2018-19. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Tara Brinkman, and I live at 574 Long Hill Road. I first want to thank the Board of Ed members for giving us the opportunity tonight to speak regarding the later start time proposal regarding Guilford High School. I would also like to thank them for their time that they have put into the research regarding this. I'm not here this evening to speak to you against the research that shows high school students should start later. While I could stand up here and say parents should just put their kids to bed earlier, we all did it, so on and so forth, I can't argue the research. What I am here to speak to you tonight are my concerns regarding starting the elementary students at 9:10. While many of you may be thinking they already start at 9 o'clock, what's 10 more minutes? Those 10 additional minutes added on to an already long and grueling day in elementary school can have a significant impact on our youngest student population. My son is in second grade at Cox. When he was in kindergarten, his bus drop time varied from day to day. On a good day, he was home at 4. Quite frequently, though, his bus would run late, and he'd be getting off the bus anywhere from 4:10 to 4:20. On those late days, he would get off the bus quite exhausted, ready for a snack in downtime. He would eat a snack, and I would send him out to play so he could burn off some of that energy that he needed to get out. The approximately 20-minute recess wasn't cutting it for my overly active child. And in the late fall and winter, this outdoor time was cut short due to daylight savings. According to minutes posted by the Guilford Start Time Task Committee, elementary students currently are dropped off as late as 4:20. They also stated that the earliest sunset in Guilford is 4:29. And by pushing the elementary schools to start 10 minutes later, this means students could potentially be dropped off as late as 4:30. And while they may not be being dropped off in the dark, where is the downtime that these elementary students need? Research done by psychologist Lee Waters states that kids need to have some downtime where they are not focused on a specific task. And a large number of our younger student population participate in after-school activities, whether it be a sport, religious education, which for 3rd and 4th graders starts at 4:30, or a park and rec program. If our children could have the potential to come home as late as 4:30, they are not getting that downtime they need before they attend their after-school activity. In an article titled Importance of Family Time on Kids' Mental Health and Adjustment to Life, Dr. Gail Fernandez discusses the importance of not rushing from school to extracurricular activities to supervising homework, and instead says you should focus on times where the parents and children are fully engaged in an activity together. For many, this may be unfortunately just what happens if the elementary student population is required to go to school 10 minutes later. I would also like to reference an article posted in the Washington Post back in January of last year. At the time the article was published, Montgomery County schools in Maryland were in their 2nd year of later start times. Their high school, which originally had started at 7:20, had pushed their start time to 7:45. During this 2-year time, additional research and debate was being done, but much like here in Guilford, Montgomery County viewed this as a no-cost first step toward healthier school hours for teenagers. Elementary schools in Montgomery County, which run on 2 different waves, were also pushed 10 minutes later, start times of 9 and 9:25. While the 25-minute change in the high school start time showed to be valuable, the impact on elementary schools was not so positive. A Montgomery board member stated there were some unintended consequences. Principals of the elementary schools shared that students were arriving at school overly early because parents had to be to work at the same time. And I would anticipate that this could happen with our Before Care program as well. Montgomery County elementary students were also provided with a late bus for after-school activities such as sport enrichment and after-school choir. However, the enrollment in these activities declined by 30% because parents didn't want their children getting home in the dark. Principals and teachers also reported children, especially the younger population in the elementary school, were growing more tired during the day and were unable to develop the academic stamina. They also reported buses were also late arriving to school, delaying the start of instruction time. In a quick online poll that I conducted that featured 20 Connecticut elementary schools inside and outside our county, 16 of those schools started before the hours of 8 and 8:55. 2 started at 9 and 2 started after 9. The parents of the students that had the later start time all had the same comment about their child getting home late. I am strongly urging you to reconsider your proposal of starting our elementary students 10 minutes later for the upcoming year. Mr. Bloss has been quoted saying this is the most complicated issue he has been involved with since his time on the board. I ask you to think of this issue as a very major, complicated surgery. You are the doctors and the students are your patients. You've done the research and you know the benefits of performing the surgery. As the doctor, there are 2 ways to perform it. Both ways will help your patients. However, one has some side effects that could be hard to recover from, and the other may take a bit more time and a bit longer to perform, but all the patients will be better off. I ask you to consider your youngest patients before moving further with this surgery to our school district. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Valerie Ferrucci. I have 2 children, one in preschool, one in 3rd grade at Guilford Lakes. I live at 1595 Little Meadow Road. I am in agreement with the science of high school students starting later and hope for implementation in the fall of this year. I have read the executive summary from the task force and appreciate all the efforts being made. There are many variables with the busing and it seems to be a work in progress. My one concern is with the change in middle school restructuring. I do agree with Dr. Freeman with the number of transitions being difficult on children and anticipate difficulties with with my own children. However, I would hope that, as has been done with the Start School Later initiative, that this be examined from different directions before coming to a conclusion. There's also a friend of mine that could not be in attendance, but I'm going to read her speech. Her name is Kim Schmidt, and she lives at 140 Wild Rose Avenue. Thank you to the Board of Ed and the task force for their attention to school start times. I'm in favor of the proposal to start all schools a bit later, while also looking for busing efficiencies. I couldn't be here tonight since I have a 2-month-old. My daughter goes to A.W. Cox, and I really look forward to seeing what improvements can be made to shortening bus route 21, which is one of the longest in the district. Currently, she doesn't take the bus in the morning due to the length, but would if it were a bit shorter. Thank you.
My name is Heidi Smith. I live at 885 Lake Drive, and I have a middle schooler. And I'm in favor of the later start times and the research that provides. I am opposed to doing a Band-Aid approach to implementing the plan over 2 years because we don't know what the final plan is. And I take issue with not knowing whether we're going to move ahead with the school divide and pursue that because we have lots of resources working on that. We can't then add more time to elementary because they're already going to get at the maximum capacity of getting out of school and then not getting off in the dark. I think that we really have to pursue, or I would hope that we could pursue looking at some other options, whether it's the 2-tier busing. I know it costs money. If you look at any other town that has tried to implement it, they've all spent money. And we're trying to do it without spending money with lots of challenges as it relates to our geography and how do we have to move people. I think we have to look at what options are best for our students. In the 2-tier bus situation, when the survey was done, got a lot of support. And it may cost money, but my guess is it may cost more money than dividing our schools, which has a lot of opposition. So I think we have to really look at it and pull all of the options as opposed to a small Band-Aid to satisfy the start time and little increments until we know what the big picture is going to be. Thank you.
Tracy Lynch of 445 Goose Lane. I have a son who used to be an early riser. Now he's a teenager. So if you're going to give me 10, 15 minutes, I'm going to take it. Thank you very much. Right now we're talking about splashing water on his face, the alarm that goes under the mattress, you name it, we bought it. So the idea of him having to be at our bus stop next year in high school, he'll be a freshman, at 6:20, is going to make me go against my religion, which is driving him to school every day. That's against my religion. I will have to do that next year because there's no way that he's going to wake up and be at the bus stop at 6:20. I do recognize everyone's thoughts on the elementary school. I honestly hadn't given it much thought because my children are out of that stage. So I do have concerns about that. I love the idea of switching the elementary for the high school because both of my kids were up and we were waiting for that bus for 3 hours. 3 hours. Anyway, the other thing I did want to say is there is a lot of discussion and a lot of misconception, or maybe it's the truth, and people do think, the popular opinion is that the school start times are directly related to the school restructuring, and that is a huge concern for a lot of us parents. I think most people are strongly opposed to the school restructuring, so I think there just needs to be clarity on that going forward because a lot of people are opposing the change in the high school time because they think it's going to affect the schools.
This, and I think I mentioned it in my initial remarks, that is not part of the proposal.
Period. Yeah,
Simply,
I'm just telling you what the Facebook people are saying.
I understand.
Okay, I just want you to be aware.
And I've learned way too late in life that I can't stop what people are saying.
Okay.
But I can try to correct misassumptions, and
right.
that is simply not part of the proposal.
Thank you.
It is also not part of the proposal to add enough money to go to the 2-tier bus system. There is a way out of this with adding buses. we think there's a way out of this. We haven't explored it in detail because the last time we explored it in detail, it was very expensive, and the bus company wasn't even sure it could be done because of the labor problems in school, with school buses now, with getting a two-tier system would allow us to, say, do elementary schools in 5, 6 in one run, and a high school in Baldwin, or in Adams in the other run. Now, transporting a third more people in each wave, but only using 2 waves, is going to be more expensive because we have to add buses, we have to add drivers if we did that. We don't know exactly what that number is. We've just hired a new bus company. But it's probably going to be somewhere in the $500,000 and or above range. I think Dr. Freeman got one kind of back of the envelope estimate with the new company that it would be significantly above that, more in the area of $1 million. So that's about 2% of our operating budget. I don't know. I mean, maybe I could just ask a show of hands. Would you? Let me think about. So somebody who's got a $5,000 tax bill, would you be in favor of adding $100 to your tax bill? Did I do the math right? I think I did. Would you? Yeah, no, just for hands. And I understand how unscientific this is. I get it, all right? This isn't the Gallup poll, all right? So, but $100 to your tax bill to go to 2 waves. Okay, who would not be in favor of adding taxes? All right, so there are more people here that would pay an extra $100. But again, I just want to remind everybody, this is not a totally representative group of the town of Guilford. So, but anyway, that's something that there is no way to affect high school start times without also affecting other school start times without spending money. Right? I mean, no, spending, really, there's just no way you could do it without doing that. So anyway, that's just something that we should continue to look at. I think we're probably in a little bit better shape in terms of the state budget than we were 3 years ago. But that's the problem.
Well, I wanted to thank the board for moving in this direction and doing the research. And I am very much in favor of letting my son and the rest of our teenagers have the sleep that they need, because to them it's like oxygen. To us it's like oxygen. The science is there, productivity increases, attention increases. There's just so many positive benefits to it, so thank you for looking into this.
Hi, Sarah Bertolini, 1295 Great Hill Road. I too am in favor of eventually a later start time to an 8 to 8:30. I am opposed to the 10-minute change for next year. While I hear people say it's an extra 50 minutes a week of sleep for many students, I will tell you the reality in my household. We actually are able to allow our daughter 30 minutes extra sleep a day because I am able to drop her off on my way to work. If the start time is changed 10 minutes, she will no longer have that extra 30 minutes. So in our household, she will actually get less sleep. And I imagine I'm not alone in that. So that's my concern.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Kathy Haskell. I live at 189 Little Meadow Road as well. I would like to thank you because obviously you all have put a lot of time and energy and effort into this. I'd like to start by also saying I oppose the 10-minute later start time. I have an elementary school student who will be transitioning to middle school year after next. We don't exactly get up early at the crack of dawn, and he's not raring to go in the morning. It's a bit of a fight, but I do think that the later start time is evidentiary result of getting improvement. The productivity will be there. The success will be there. I also think that there has to be some give and take also from the high school realm. So I hear you saying that there was discussion about work schedules and athletic schedules and things like that, but at some point, something also has to give. So if they're going to get the extra sleep, they also have to be willing to give a little as well. So I think that the swapping of the elementary and high school should be revisited. Again, it's a different set of people. It's 5 years later than you started looking. It's 3 years later than you gave us the survey. It's a different group of people. I'm not even sure it's really fair because obviously the community is not here to be able to represent themselves completely for various reasons. So obviously it should be more widely spread as far as that information goes. But I do believe that those young students do need to have more physical exercise. They need more outside time. And my child does get off a very busy road, and more than once, I have almost been hit going to get him to cross the street because people don't stop for those buses. And that's during the day with light hours. There's no street lights, there's no sidewalks, lights flashing, stop signs going, people still don't stop for buses always. That is a real concern, and I realize it's a concern for some people in the morning. It's much less busy at 7 a.m. than it is at 4 or 5 p.m. I can tell you that from personal experience because I'm a walker. So Little Meadow's a busy road, but ultimately it is much busier in the evening and afternoons than it is in the morning. So the concern for me would be getting off the bus in the afternoons at a later hour, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever it is. And I do think that it's difficult for those young students to focus at 3 o'clock. I think the specials end up being in the afternoon because they quite frankly can't focus on academics. So ultimately, I think swapping is really someplace that needs to be revisited. It allows the students to get later start times for the high schoolers, later than 8 o'clock, later than 8:30. Whether we tweak that or not, I think, again, it's going to be not a cost-neutral solution. It's not a cost-neutral solution no matter how you do it in my house. We're going to have to pay for before care if you change the start times, period. Because we already wait for a bus that doesn't come at 8:20 or 8:30. It's supposed to come at 8:30, but it comes more at 8:45 because it's always later because of all the other buses. So ultimately, we're talking about a child who has to then rush to elementary school, sometimes late, but on the bus. That will now definitely have to do a before care program, so he will get less sleep and less activity. So I think it does need to be revisited. I think there does need to be some considerations with regard to it not being cost neutral in households for any number of reasons, like that last woman had spoken about. And the fact of the matter is, there's a lot of benefit to having the younger kids earlier and having that positive outside time and having that unstructured play and having the ability to have downtime before extracurriculars. And the high schoolers will have their extra sleep. So ultimately, I appreciate that there's work, that there's athletic considerations, but at the same time, they're also getting their extra sleep. So I think there is about prioritizing, about choosing. If it's for health and wellness, what do you choose? And I think that has to be considered and that has to be discussed. And you can talk to some of these adolescents, and they're going to have to make those hard choices too. So I just think that you should propose that. Thanks.
I want to be heard. Marie DeFelice, 128 Jamestown Drive. And I'm going to speak, in spite of what has been said, that this is not in the plan, this has not been voted on, et cetera, but I have to tell you my concerns at the very possibility of restructuring the middle school. And let me further identify myself. I know you don't want to hear it, but I have to say, I am not a doctor, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not an accountant, but what I am is a middle school teacher with 32 years of experience in the classroom. In addition to that, I was here when we had two campuses, two middle school separate campuses, where Adams was 6th, 7th, and 8th, and Baldwin was 6th, 7th, and 8th. And let me tell you, there were lots of problems. For one thing, the 8th graders kind of looked down on the 6th graders, kids being what they are. They would sometimes make fun of them, and they treated them a little bit like babies. And I'm not saying all the 8th graders did this, but it did happen. And the other thing is having the two campuses, if ever you're considering it, caused a division in the town. Kids from the town and around that area were the Adams kids. Kids from North Guilford and all that area were the Baldwin kids. And there was competition and division in the town because of that, not only with the kids, but with the parents too. That was a problem. It was like two sub-school systems within the whole school system. Was not a good thing. And then further on the bus, it was more of a problem because now you had 6th graders and 8th graders on the bus. And there was some bullying, not a lot, and not a lot of mean-spirited kind of stuff. But the 8th graders would look down at the 6th graders or tease them, And the language that the 8th graders sometimes use should not have been heard, and the topics they discuss should not have been heard by the 6th grade ears. So there were those problems. And at that time, and I'm going back years, but at that time we had a new superintendent come into town. His name was Dr. Giblin. And I remember Dr. Giblin having some stress about these problems with the 2 campuses. And he got us all together and he said he had a solution. So his solution was that Adams was going to be 7th and 8th grade, Baldwin was going to be 5th and 6th grade. And we thought, oh, how is this going to work out? But we were for it. We were willing to change. I went from Adams to Baldwin to be with my 6th graders. And it was a wonderful solution, because now you had that 7th and 8th grade age in one school. Those kids were looking towards the high school. You had the 5th and 6th graders who had just come from an elementary mentality, and they all got along just fine. So what I'm saying is that if you ever consider 5th adding into this combination, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th in one school, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th in another school, not only are you going to have the problems that we had, but you're going to have a more complicated situation. I'm just foreseeing if this ever happens. I just want to be here telling you that I'm not pulling these ideas from some data or research or a book or anything else. I'm doing it from my own experience as a teacher here in Guilford. And I've also heard one more thing, that the transition of the changes that the students have to go through cause stress. Well, let me tell you something. When the 4th graders come up to Baldwin, and that's where I spent most of my time, they are a little nervous, they are a little anxious, but, and this is the truth, within days, because of the staff there, the administration there, the teachers there, within days, those kids are fine. And if you have the few that are very anxious or do have problems, you have Mrs. Marr and Mr. Canestri, who are counselors, who are awesome. And they take care of these individual kids. And it's a beautiful thing to see. And then the stress of the 6th graders going to the 7th and 8th grade, I never saw that it existed. Because by the time they get to the 6th grade, they're looking to go to the big school, the school near the green where they have more freedom. They just can't wait to go to that campus. So I don't think that the transitions cause any significant stress on the kids. You want to see stress, put the 5th and 8th graders together and you will see a lot of stress. So I'll just stop now. I could go on for a long time, but I won't. But I will tell you that experience is the best teacher. And I'm speaking from experience. That split school did not work years ago, and it certainly won't work now. Thank you.
On the table, I promise. And in case anybody's just tuning into the TV, I just want to correct, this is not a proposal at this time. It is not on the table. It is not something we are going to vote on. It is not something we are going to consider. So if anything changes, everybody's going to know about that. So just again, to make sure that that is clear. Please, yes.
No, of course. My name is Leslie Finn. I live at 174 Wild Rose Avenue. I am an educator and a parent who lives in Guilford, and I believe in evidence-based decision-making, and even more than that, evidence-based science. I support later start times, and specifically I support the board to make the change, even if incremental, this coming school year. I just want to, before I speak my piece, say a thank you to the experts who are providing the evidence-based facts for our decisions and for you all to proceed with your decision-making. And among them, Dr. Kanapari, who is someone who doesn't have a financial stake in this decision-making. He is a neutral party, but he is an expert. He is a parent of 2 children, and we're lucky to have him. And I'm deeply, deeply grateful for those in our community who are volunteering their time to flesh out the various matters that need to be taken into consideration for the project to move forward. That is my main concern, is that to delay another year until everything is perfect for everyone is just improbable. And I think it's best if we move forward in incremental stages, and I think the time is now. There's a lot of emotion and attachment to past patterns and traditions, including when we all started school and when our children started school. But if there's something that will allow our children to achieve their full academic potential and will safeguard their physical and mental health and at a low cost, I don't understand how we can claim allegiance to tradition with that in mind. I worry that there is a questionable value being placed on the status quo that I'm not comfortable with, and I trust in my school board and the people that are representing us, that we voted in, that they will take into consideration the various elements that need careful consideration, and that has happened over the last few years. I feel like there's been quite a lot of deliberation. Yes, occasionally I tune into social media and witness that with as much of a level head as I can, but I think that the time is now to move forward. And if something as modest as changing start times even by 10 minutes, if anyone's ever had a power nap, you know how 10 minutes can make a huge difference. I think if that can achieve positive change, count me in. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Nuria Miller. I live at 1131 Little Meadow Road. The same as everybody, we're really thankful about all the job that you guys do, and we are thankful for the task force and all the research that they have done and everything. I'm just a little bit confused about what you were saying about not being considered, like the restructuring of the school. In Dr. Freeman's slides, he said that for the Guilford High School start time at 7:55 by September of 19, there were no clear solutions at this time, but that possible solutions could include increasing the cost or restructuring the schools. So if it's not being considered, why are we talking about it?
Because people are talking about it, but it's not being considered. I can't.
You're not considering it, but it's going to be considered at some point. If this doesn't
No.
go for the 2018, then
No.
one of the possible solutions would be to restructuring the school, and that's a lot of the concern of the parents. I am going to be affected anyway. I have 4 kids ranging from 10 years old to 2 months old, so if we change the school time, I'm going to be affected for my 10-year-old, my 7-year-old, my 3-year-old, and my later 2-month-old. So I am for the change. I really don't have a preference. I know that it's going to be either my 7-year-old that's going to be affected or my 10-year-old when she goes to high school. But the only thing that I really am not for is for restructuring the schools. I don't want my 5th grader, who is now in 5th grade, to be hanging out with an 8th grader, because like the teacher said, the things that happened 20 years ago were not as bad as the things that are happening right now. And the stories that we hear that happen in the Adams Middle School between the 7th graders and the 8th graders are horror stories that I don't want my 5th grader, whenever my kid is in 5th grade, to be happening with the 8th graders. When my daughter, who is a 5th grader now, is in 8th grade, she's going to have the mentality to be able to be an 8th grader, but 5th graders right now and 6th graders don't have the mentality to be hanging out with kids that are 4 years older than them. Right now, we're all adults, and it doesn't seem different that I am 41 years old and somebody here is 60 years old, and we can be friends and we can hang out. When the kids are younger, that is totally not possible. I could not have been my husband's girlfriend when he was in high school and I was in elementary school. if that makes any sense. So I do not want my kid to be, it is impossible. So I don't want my daughter or my son or my next two daughters to be hanging out in the same bus and in the same school with kids that are 4 years older, because now the kids, with all the social media that we're discussing and all the things that are being happening, it's gonna be worse, like the teacher just said, it's gonna be worse than it was 20 years ago. So it is confusing that it is in the slides, but you guys are saying that it's not gonna be considered. So if it's not gonna be considered, I don't think it should even be in the slides, because that's what people are talking about it, because we keep seeing it over and over and over again. And that's the only thing I wanted to say.
I'm going to say it again. It is not being considered at this time. If it ever is considered by the task force or by anybody else, it'll be the subject of a meeting just like this. I promise you, there is not going to be anything like that on the table this year. I promise. Okay?
You're saying this year.
I mean, look, so let me ask a question, though. Does everybody understand what a two-tier, everybody who raised their hand wanting to go to a two-tier bus system, who were you again? Raise your hand again. Okay. Now, do you understand that that would be K through 6 on a bus and 7 through 12 on a bus? And are you okay with that? Okay, fine. If everybody's okay with that, because that's a 7-year spread, or a 6-year spread. I'm sorry? That's true. I understand. We do have 5th graders on a bus right now with 8th graders. That's true. That's a good point. Thank you. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead, please.
My name is Carissa Ross, and I live at 50 Jamestown Drive. I am a freshman at Guilford High School, and I'm curious about the actual benefit of the later start time. How many children will actually get more sleep, or will they stay up later knowing they have a later start time? Personally, if I knew I could wake up later, even if it was 10 minutes, I would stay up later. So, as I stated before, can anyone truly be sure that a later start time will be benefiting the children? Thank you.
My name is Camille Gibson, and I live on 38 Seaview Terrace, and I'm also a freshman at the high school. My main concern with this is that, first of all, it's only 15 minutes pushed back, but even though it's such a small amount of time, we are going to be losing 5 minutes of passing period, right, every day. And we only have 6 minutes of passing period anyways, every passing period. And so I don't think we'll have as much, we won't have as much time to do the things we need to, like, we need to return Chromebooks, or maybe we forgot something in a previous class, we have to go get it, or we have to talk to like a teacher after class and then go to the next class. And the floors are like really far apart. It's like the first floor, the third floor is like a lot of stairs, and sometimes there's a lot of traffic in between them, so we might get a class later, and it's just, I don't think 10 minutes or 15 minutes is worth losing some time in between classes.
Hi, I'm Andy Gottlieb. I live at 680 Tanner Marsh Road. I'm speaking here tonight in support of later school start times. I think that the scientific and medical evidence is crystal clear. And I think, of course, as we've heard tonight, the anecdotal evidence is also very clear. I'm 24 years old. I was in the class of 2010. I feel pretty old now. I'm only just now being able to tolerate getting up really early. But back then, it was a very difficult thing to do. And I think that's the case for most students. We talk a lot about all the great accomplishments of our high school students, about how great their test scores are, and how many awards they bring back every year. But just think of how much better they could be doing without this obstacle in their way. It's such a stressful time in their life. I think we could be doing more to help our own students and make an easier time for them. So I think that I certainly support later school start times, and I think that the moving it forward by 10 minutes would be a good first step. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Sarah Kate Lizzie. I live at 38 Rosemary Lane. I think I bring a unique perspective as I am a Guilford Public Schools graduate. I am a current full-time teacher at Melissa Jones in North Guilford, completing my 12th year here at Guilford Public Schools, and I'm a rising parent to a kindergarten student in a few years. And I understand that the problem is a multifaceted problem stemming from sleep, and I know that there's been a lot of talk about the suicide study that was presented in Guilford. And so I wonder if more should be looked at beyond just sleep, if we're doing our children justice by ignoring some of the other issues that we culturally have, such as a use in screen time. I know in the 12 years that I've been in Guilford Public Schools, there's been a rise in kids bringing screens to school, which that didn't happen when I got hired because I don't even think I had an iPhone. So in speaking about screen time, we also see a rise in the diagnosis of children coming in with anxiety. I started in 2006, and from then to now, we've seen a steady incline of children who are coming into us already diagnosed with anxiety. And I know the anxiety comes up again when we talk about the high school and sleep, but what services are we providing to those general ed kids who have anxiety, who aren't being screened or seen? I know other schools in our DIRG have a full-time psych in each building. We only have a half-time psych in each building. I know other schools in our DIRG use youth and family services to support the school social worker. Currently, we don't have that. We have one full-time social worker who services both children with 504s, IEPs, and general ed students. Going back to screen times, I know that we can only do so much between the hours of my hours between 9 and 3:30. But statisticians are constantly quoting that 50% of children, elementary school children, have TVs in their bedrooms. For every hour they watch, 26 fewer minutes of sleep occur, and it takes a greater time to get to sleep. So if we want to talk about the sleep problem, isn't it a multifaceted problem, and shouldn't we be attacking it from more than just the sleep side? We see children already experiencing test anxiety in 3rd and 4th grade. Are we over-testing our children? From the parent side, after and before school care is an issue. I know that sometimes kids don't get on the bus at our school until 3:40, so pushing that back 10 minutes, that means at 10 minutes to 4 kids are getting on the bus to go home, which means they would definitely be getting home after dark. All research says that kids need more outdoor unstructured time, and if they're getting home that late, that's obviously not going to happen. Personally, as a teacher, by 3 o'clock most days, the kids are done. Especially this time of year, it's really hard to hold their attention till 3:25. I cannot imagine holding them another 10 minutes. And I know teachers are an important stakeholder in all of this, and I hope that more teachers from Guilford Public Schools have the opportunity to speak. But on the other side of it, I think it's worth to note the rise in costs and substitutes, because currently I can get out of school and get to an appointment downtown from good old North Guilford at 4 o'clock. If we move start times back, that's not going to happen, and I'm going to have to take a half day in order to get my child to the doctor or get myself to the doctor. One teacher doing it once, it doesn't seem like much, but if you have the entire elementary school population doing that because they can't get out to appointments because everything's been moved back, then that might be a larger line item cost than you maybe had thought of. Just something to think about. Thank you very much for your time.
Good evening. My name is Chris Moore, 151 Whitfield Street. I'm a physician. I'm a father of 4 children in the school system. I've served on the Board of Ed for 8 years, and I'm chairing the task force. So I thought I just would put a face in front of you all. It's really great, actually, to see so many people that come out and take your time to listen and speak about these issues. We meet as a task force. We've been doing so for the last almost a year, and sometimes it feels like we're in isolation. I would also like to just mention that we're open to people writing us, to coming to our meetings. We had one meeting where I think 3 parents showed up, and we did involve them in the conversation. They're publicly posted meetings. We're not trying to do this behind closed doors. We're all a group of parents, scientists, teachers, students. We have 3 students on the task force, Rick Vicenti, the school principal, obviously Paul Freeman. So it's a task force that really is trying to do the best for the students. I'm here somewhat biased to speak for the 15 minutes this year. I wrote the interim report, the first draft anyway, that was revised. And just a few comments on some of the things that have been raised. First of all, on whether 15 minutes is enough. I believe, looking at the evidence, that this is a linear model, meaning that the more that you get, the better. I will have 3 children in high school next year, a senior, a junior, and a freshman. So for us in our household, 15 minutes times 3 times 5 days a week is substantial. It's not a perfect solution. As Craig Mullett mentioned, this could have been the end force task force in the sense that we spent 2 full meetings talking about how late we could go on the high school. We looked at all of the athletic schedules, as well as heard from people as far as employment and things like that, and we spent 2 meetings arguing about minutes and came up with 2:33 as probably as late as we would want to go. So, you know, ideally we would move a bit later to 7:55 or 8, but that does involve a budgetary impact. One of the things I'm really heartened to hear from the audience is the enthusiasm for potentially moving the elementary schools to an earlier start time. 7:25 would have been too early for the elementary schools, and I think that had we approached that like immediately switching, there's no way we could have gotten that done. But one thing that could be possible is to move 15 minutes and then really look at moving the elementary school start time to 7:40, which I think might be actually reasonable. There are other solutions, including 2-tier busing. We are really pressing our busing company to look at efficiencies and to give us pricing on 2 tiers, how that might work. But I will tell you, I mean, the budget passed by 300 votes this year, and if this becomes a referendum on the start times, it's nice to see all the people raising their hands in here that they vote for it, but it would be challenging in this town to pass $500,000 to $1 million increase per year to garner an extra half an hour, 15 minutes of sleep for the high school students. So I am leery of turning this into a budget referendum on the start times. So I'm here to speak strongly in favor of making the move this year for 15 minutes. I do hear the concerns of the elementary parents. I've had 4 of my children go through elementary school. I know how it is when they get up early and come home later. But I think that the benefit for the high school students would outweigh really the detriment to the elementary students. The other thing, one of the students brought up the passing time issue. We looked at that in detail. One of the benefits of going from the old high school to the new high school, which I was also very involved in, is that we moved to a much more vertical structure, and we talked to all the students and teachers about the passing time, and it was pretty much, there was consensus that we would be able to trim that by a minute without impacting their ability to get to the classes. So we've looked at these things in a lot of detail, and I just want to let you know that, and also just invite you to be involved and to communicate with us. This is not a done deal, and it's not something we're trying to shove down anyone's throat. It's a lot of people getting together and trying to do the best thing for the students in our community. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Tina Roman, 622 White Birch Drive, and I'm a mom, and I'm a community volunteer, and I am also a pediatrician. And I have 3 boys that go to the high school in Adams and Baldwin. And they are involved in music and sports and other after-school activities and working in the community. And so I'm coming at this from a lot of different angles. I want to thank the Board of Ed and the task force for taking on this issue. I think it's really important, and I'm really excited that so many really smart and dedicated people are looking very hard at this, and I am optimistic that something good will come from this. I will just say that I do think that a 10-minute or 15-minute change is beneficial. I am very much in favor of doing something this year, even if it's only 15 minutes. I'm also in favor of a 2-tier bus system that would, eliminate a lot of time spent on the buses. And I don't remember I think early in the discussion many years ago, there was a discussion of swapping, as Chris Moore was saying, I think think he was alluding to keeping the high school in the middle tier, or I don't remember. If there was a way to swap elementary and middle schools to result in a different structure to the three-tier system. I don't. So that's all I want to say. Thank you. Thanks for taking this on.
Hello, John Mayo, 199 Village Pond Road in Guilford, obviously. Apologies, I missed the presentation. I was at the high school for a honors foreign language assembly tonight, so I missed the presentation, but Dr. Moore just did answer one of my questions. And as opposed to start times, I'd really like to talk about end times at the high school. With Dr. Moore saying we would go to maybe as possible late as 2:33. Is that right, Chris? Maybe at the 2019 sense? That would probably be the possible.
The consensus on the latest time that would be.
With next year's phasing in going 10 minutes back to 2:18, correct? Okay. I know this board is sick of hearing me as the swim dad, and I'm here often. Many of you may know we started a swim team at the school this year. We have to rent our lanes at the YMCA, and if we do go much later, I'm afraid that we would lose that time, and the swim team would have to then practice in the morning before school, which would defeat this whole purpose. So I'm a little worried about that, but I think we can possibly make it work if we're going to stay closer to that. I'm just encouraging you to try to keep the end time for sports as late as possible. Personally, sophomore in high school, I do drop her off, as one of the other parents talked about that. I drop her off every morning, then continue on to work for myself, so we are saving that start time for ourselves. She has found a great balance between her social, academic, and athletic skills, practicing 3 hours a night, 6 days a week, 50 weeks of the year. She gets it done. And for us, it works, the current time. But again, as I've said to you many times, I thank you for all the time that you put in, and I'm glad that we're here talking about this tonight. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mary Jo Kessner. I live at 131 Boston Street. And I think the start time is a huge issue that's backed up by a lot of data. A huge amount was attached to the back of the report, so you know it was thoroughly vetted, and that committee's been busy, and I thank them for their good work. I have a motto that I stick on my wall, and it's a quote from Arthur Ashe. It says, "Start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can." And I think that's the way to address all these big problems. We have a problem. We know what it is. We have some things we could do. I think it's really important that we address this for the next year at the high school. I'd also like to say that my kids are in middle school now, and they do ride the bus with 5th and 8th graders, and we try to say keep it PG. That's what we do in our house. But my little sister is 4 years younger than I am, and all my life she did everything with me as much as I would try to get away from her. And I think schools are the only place where we say, you're in 5th grade, you're in 6th grade, you're in 7th grade. And around our neighborhood and in the summer and in the things they do, it's not like that. And I'm not sure we do them a service by keeping them in little boxes. And so it's with great trepidation that I consider any change with the way the schools are configured. And I am sure that you will do that with the utmost care, but I think that a lot of folks are not ready for that. But I think that part of that is we need to really understand what we're achieving by considering those options as well. But I'm willing to keep an open mind, and I encourage you to keep up the good work on this because I think it's really important for our kids. Thank you.
Jennifer Yaxall, 50 Cooks Lane. I'd like to actually start with a question. So the times are moving 10 or 15 minutes, but I thought at the very beginning, the slides that you showed some other time savings so that students would actually get like 25 more minutes of sleep. Is that correct? So it's not, is that right?
Yeah, go ahead. That's basically, well, we've got a new contract with a new busing company. I think Dr. Freeman and the busing company have worked together, and they believe that that first run can be shortened by...
So the slides that we showed show a lumping of the second and third recommendations together. So for the high school students, if we were to look at both of those the suggestions, we would save 15 minutes in the morning by moving the start time of the high school 15 minutes later. We would save an additional 10 minutes for students who ride the bus by pushing the bus pickup and drop off by an additional 10 minutes. So we have to be a little bit careful. We're moving the start time, well, the discussion is to move the start time of the high school by 15 minutes a day. But we're talking about saving the students 25 minutes of sleep per day.
That's what I thought. So it's not just 10 minutes. I mean, 25 minutes is a bigger... For some kids, right, okay. So for kids who ride the bus. So, and then just the other thing that I wanted to share was I saw recently firsthand this change in circadian rhythms. So my son practices, and he had been, because he likes to get stuff done, so for years we had him get up really early to get his practicing done so it was over and finished. So he would get up at like 5 and go to bed at like 8:30. He's in 7th grade. So he was telling me, I'd put him in, we would try to get him in bed at 8:30, and he'd say, it takes me like hours. I can't get to sleep. I wake up in the middle of the night, and I get up in the morning, and I'm exhausted. And so I said, well, maybe you got to go to bed earlier. And so then we happened to have a physical, and I was talking to his pediatrician, and she said, that won't work. She said, at this age, he needs to go to bed at 10. So we changed it. So instead of 8:30, now he goes to bed at 10. He gets to sleep faster. He sleeps through the night, and in the morning, he's not exhausted. But when he gets up, and so now I have him get up at 6:30, the high school bus is just coming through, and I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, like I can't do it at both ends. I can't make him, he can't go to bed later and then have to get up earlier. So it was just an eye-opener to see how that, like actually putting him to bed later really worked with what was going on in his body. So I am in favor of moving the start time so that he can get, 25 more minutes of sleep would actually be a good thing for him. So I appreciate all the time that you all have put in looking at this. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Mari Mariano, and I am at 191 Sperry Drive. I'm actually up here to read a letter that a friend of mine wrote. So this is her opinion and what she suggests happens. Wow, I'm really nervous. I don't know why. And I lost it. Oh my God. Does anyone else have anything to say? I can't find it. Oh God, I just had it. Okay, so it's not coming. I do have a question. I'll ask a question. Why can't the town vote on the options?
Because there's no provision under our town charter to do that.
Okay. Okay, I can't find it, so I apologize.
We did do a survey. I want to remind everybody, we did a survey, I think 3 years ago, and it is on our website. So, is that a vote? No.
Okay.
But it's something.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, if you find it, come back up.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Young. I live at 84 Fair Street. I am a mother of 2 daughters who are freshmen, and I'm also a pediatrician. And I'm here to ask a question. My daughters did start off taking their bus, which stops directly in front of our house, so we're very, very lucky. And then as the year has gone on, my kids are craving sleep, and so now I drive them. And every day it seems like we leave a little bit later, so they can get a little bit more sleep, 5 more minutes. And one question I do have is that when they have been taking the bus, I look on the bus as it stops, and I don't think there's very many stops past our house to get to the high school, and the bus is nearly empty. And I'm just asking, is there something that has anybody looked at how many of the high schoolers are?
Yeah, we have.
You have looked at it,
Some
okay.
detail. We believe that it's approximately 50% of the students take the bus. Now, and I know in 50% either drive or are driven. And if the buses were more, if the buses had more children on them, that would mean that they were making more stops, and that would mean that they are taking longer runs, which would in effect make those runs even longer than they are. So I know it's a bad visual to have not full school buses, but the only way the school buses in a town like Guilford would be full is if they made a lot more stops than they're making now, like the woman who just spoke who lives on Cook's Lane that's up in North Guilford. That route would have to be, how long would that have to be to have a full 40 kids on the bus? It'd have to be 10 miles long. So it's complicated.
One other question that I have has to do with extracurriculars after school. Both my kids are athletes at the high school, and what I've noticed is when they're in their seasons, whatever their seasons are, that they're still taking gym. And now they are freshmen, they have to take, I know they have requirements to take gym, but my question is it possible for the kids who are participating in sports to not necessarily have gym during those times? One of my kids is on the golf team, and she, right now, some of those kids are leaving school incredibly early to go play golf. And, I'm just wondering, just missing school in general, or if this is an issue for anybody else.
Board members have asked Dr. Freeman over time. It's state law.
State law.
Yeah, it's a graduation requirement set by the State Department of Education. I'm with you on this. We don't seem to have made any headway on that with the state. Sorry.
Just a question.
Yeah, fair enough.
Thank you. I do want to thank all of you for spending so much time on this. It's incredibly important. I completely agree with everything that you're doing, and I do support the later start time.
Hi, my name is Heather Gallup. I live at 1 Cheryl Lane. I moved here about 2 years ago, and I have 2 elementary students. Our elementary school in Ohio started at 8 a.m., and my kids got on the bus at 7:15, and it was dark many, many times. And I obviously haven't lived here long enough to really know generalizations or what the majority of the town might feel, but I find it hard to believe that a ton of parents of elementary school students would not either be able to be there to watch their children get on the bus if it were earlier, or you would then be forced to do before care. I'm in support of a later start time for high schools. I would ask the board to reconsider looking at elementary school start times and being willing to try and find a solution to have them start earlier, even if it means that it's dark when they get on the bus. There's give and take on every end, every age group, every adult. As the first gentleman that spoke, it's the adults that are unwilling to make the changes, the athletic teams that, and I get everything has a cost, everything has a budget, but I just think it's really important to think again, sleep and activities for our youngest children who science also proves that they don't get enough gross motor movement in their school day to begin with. And then when they are getting out late and when snow hits, and by the way, when snow hits, it means we can't go outside on the playground. And to me, as a former preschool teacher and aftercare worker, and I work at a summer camp currently year-round, there's not so much inappropriate weather as inappropriate clothing. It all comes together, but I would like to see high school be later. I don't want my kids catching the 6:20 bus that goes by in North Guilford for me. But I do think that there's more alternative. I know there were polls that were out before I ever moved here, and I would also like to ask the board to consider reissuing some of these polls. Many of those people that spoke might have been seniors, juniors, and sophomores who are now no longer in the system. Many of those people who offered their opinions were younger age, who now are in middle school. So like everything changes and everything's relative based on the time you're in at the moment. So that's all I have. Thank you.
I found it. Okay. So again, this is from Kim Vigliotti, who lives at 11 Eastgate Road in Guilford. I'm reading this for her. I'm writing this letter to express my support and make suggestions for consideration as plans develop related to the later high school start time. As a former dean of students at Guilford High School, I completely understand the problems that exist with the early bus schedule and school start time at Guilford High School. During my time at Guilford High, I would have to arrive to work by 6:30 a.m. to be ready to greet the first busload of students dropped off at approximately 6:45 or 6:50 each day. We do not need science to realize that this extremely early start time is detrimental to adolescents. While I believe the newest proposed school schedule is a start, I do not believe it should be the end. I'm hopeful that the Board of Ed will adopt a plan to work creatively to push the school start time to a minimum of 45 to 60 minutes later to achieve the positive results cited in the research. With creative thinking and consulting with other districts who have made this work, I believe this can happen as early as the next school year. I understand that it has been stated that a dismissal time of between 2:33 p.m. could pose a problem with the high school sports schedule. This, however, does not seem to be an issue at Greenwich Public Schools, who have recently adopted a later school start schedule. They have adopted a system which they are calling an opportunity block during the last period of the day to allow for a dismissal time of 3:15 p.m. According to the attached article, under the approved plan, Greenwich High School will continue to dismiss at 3:15, but the final block of the school day will be what was called an opportunity block, where students will be allowed to work on academic pursuits in school or have excused early dismissal for athletic or after-school job commitments. This would allow athletes to be excused during their last period of the day to attend games as needed. If we're truly preparing students to be career and college ready, this is something we should begin to examine. 21st century learning. Opportunities for students to manage the responsibilities of balancing school workload, sports, and other extracurricular activities. Additionally, I believe Guilford High School should seriously begin exploring online classes for students. In my current position as a college before college counselor in New Haven Public Schools, I work directly with high school students taking college courses at Yale, Southern, and Gateway. Online courses are the way of the future, and many colleges do offer students opportunities for online learning. Managing their schedules while meeting course demands and deadlines is a skill that our high schoolers should have, and online course options at the high school level will certainly prepare students to be college and career ready. Finally, I offer the perspective as a mother of 3 young boys. One of my children is currently in 3rd grade, another is in 1st grade, and my 3rd child will be entering kindergarten in 2019. I'm very concerned about our youngest students arriving home any later from school than they already do. They too are involved in many extracurricular activities, religions, classes, sports, music programs, etc., many of which begin at approximately 5 and 5:30 p.m. Already my children and most elementary age children get home at approximately 3:45 or 4:15. At this time, we barely have enough time for a snack, to complete homework, and rest before running out the door to our after-school commitment. If the elementary schedule is altered to dismiss any later, these young children, who also are issued homework most nights of the week, will have little time to complete homework, eat snack, dinner, and get to bed at a reasonable time, which is required to maintain their mental and physical health per their body clocks and sleep patterns. This leads me to the following suggestion for consideration for the 2018-2019 year. GHS adopt the proposed Adams-Baldwin schedule. Elementary schools adopt the proposed GHS schedule, and Adams and Baldwin adopt the proposed elementary schedule. Based on this suggestion, GHS would dismiss at 2:40 or 2:50, Baldwin and Adams would dismiss at 3:35, and the elementary schools would dismiss at 2:18. From my experience and based on many of my discussions with parents, younger children tend to rise earlier and go to bed earlier as well, So this proposed schedule would seem to address the needs of all students in the district. Additionally, I suggest we look toward the future to find additional efficiencies to make the start time no earlier than 8:15 a.m. for any of the schools in Guilford. This will, of course, push the high school dismissal time beyond the time in which has been advised by the athletics program, but by allowing for a flexible schedule and alternative opportunities for classes and/or makeup opportunities, this can work, as Greenwich is doing. Thank you for your time and consideration of these suggestions and concerns. Kimberly Vigliotti, parent and community member.
Talk about the Greenwich situation. There are towns that have implemented a later start time simply by reducing the instructional day. And now that's not Greenwich, sort of, although it is kind of sort of a reduction in the instructional day. And I asked Dr. Freeman to kind of explain what they did in Greenwich because it's something that he, I think, is not particularly. He has not been supportive because the one neutral principle that we have tried to make sure we honor is that there would be no shortening of the instructional day simply to lead to later start time. So can you just summarize what they did in Greenwich?
Yeah, so we're familiar with the newspaper article. I have not spoken to Greenwich since that article was published, but we have reached out to Greenwich. In the quickest assessment of what they're doing, if the start time and end time is remaining the same as it was last year, but if they're making the last period of the day essentially an optional period, the only way they could have achieved that would have been to reduce the required instructional time. And so there are lots of schools that are building in flex periods. Many of our elementaries and middle schools have those flex periods, and it gives you the opportunity for students to have some choice and to vary the activities. But I have a question out to Greenwich. I will follow up with Greenwich, but my initial assessment is that the only way that they achieved that is by shortening the instructional day and calling that what's essentially an optional period. Some students will sign out early, other students will have study hall, and some students may do enrichment or remedial work, but it's not going to be credit-bearing work. So I do want to follow up on that. I'd also note that the suggestion that was put up earlier has our end time at 2:18, which essentially with their hour optional block brings Greenwich back to a 2:15 dismissal, although they won't be running the buses until 3:15. It's beginning to approach what high schools have referred to as open campus. If you don't have a period, if you don't have a scheduled class that last period, you're free to be dismissed, and they're making it a free period for all. I'll know more by the time the task force meets next time. Thank you.
Can I ask a quick question regarding that? Dr. Freeman, are study halls in our district, are they credit bearing? No, correct?
No.
Do we know what percentage of our students have study halls in the high school?
So off the top of my head, I don't. I do know that the task force discussed before, why can't we just put all study halls into the last period? That's not a factor of how many study halls we have, that's simply a factor of staffing. If we were to schedule all of the student study halls for the last period, we would have to increase our staff to a degree that we could cover all the instructional needs in all of the earlier periods, and that would simply be an excessive cost.
So is there a way that you could get back to me on that to let me know how many of our students have study halls that are non-credit bearing?
I'd be happy to give you a call on.
I appreciate it. Email, whatever, anything, whatever works. I was super heartened by the creativity and the thought of whoever it was that wrote that email and the lady who was kind enough to read it out. There's no doubt that everybody on the Start Time Task Force has been working hard. The Board of Ed has been working hard. There are many in the community who have been working hard. I'm a chapter leader of Start School Later and have been for 3 years. I devote a lot of my own time to looking over bus schedules and going over the research, public education on the topic, et cetera, et cetera. And I wouldn't want to leave here tonight with anyone thinking that anybody thinks that that problems with the students as far as their health or their academics, car accidents, sports injuries, substance abuse, is being addressed with one approach, and that is sleep. Guilford Day Coalition is extremely active They're helping to build up our students as well as to try and reduce substance abuse and risky behavior. There are many groups, many people, and many people here do double and triple duty in our community to do just that, to have a multi-pronged approach to lifting up our kids and also, removing the detrimental problems that any grade is having, okay? So there are many opportunities to get involved, informally, formally, and I encourage you all to do so. There's no one single way to improve the health of students. There's no one single, this is it, the magic bullet. Yes, Guilford was found to have the 4th highest rate of inpatient hospitalization for suicide attempts and completion suicide in the state of Connecticut. That's a fact. I'm very confident in that research. Do I think that later start times, if everybody here waved the magic wand and made it 8:30 in 2018, that all of that would go away? No, I don't. But later school, I don't even want to say later school start times, healthy school start times, okay, are the #1 best way to affect the greatest number of students to the greatest degree, because it affects the entire high school. It's 1,100 students that you're giving an opportunity to get more rest, to get up at a healthy hour, okay? So when we have things like special interest things, like maybe this team or that team, if parents and students want to sign up, for a team that has, difficulty scheduling, they're practicing, etc., then I would encourage those sorts of groups, those special groups, to consider doing their practices before school and making that a choice that they make, that they are making a choice to take away the sleep time, and that they're okay with that maybe their kids do just fine, because there are some kids who just do fine getting up at 5:45 in the morning and starting their day. There are some kids who do just fine with that. That's not typically the reason, that's not what it shows for the majority of kids. So that could be a choice. It is not currently a choice for public school children in Guilford to start school any later than 7:25. The earliest bus pickup is 6:20. That means by district policy, and correct me if I'm wrong, they have to be at the bus stop at 6:13. So it's even, when you really dive deep into this, it starts earlier and earlier and earlier, So yes, we start earlier at 7:25 than 90% of American high schools, but our buses are picking up and dropping off even earlier than a lot of other districts in the state and the country. Now, yes, do we want a referendum on school start times? I'm not really too interested in a referendum on school start times. I'm part of many of you who tries to get out the vote, to get people to get out and vote on the budget, for all of our interests. And it's not easy to do that. However, there are other solutions. There are many solutions that can be implemented. But one thing I definitely want to say is that, I love the surgical idea, that there could be 2 approaches. I'm a cardiothoracic surgical nurse coordinator. This is what I do every day. And what I can tell you is that there may be differing opinions, and there certainly are, in medicine as to which is the best approach for a patient. But what is not okay is doing nothing. Doing nothing is not okay. The status quo and just not choosing one or the other or something, when adolescents are being detrimentally impacted every single day in this school district. My kids, your kids when they get to that age. I was shocked that my kid that used to get up at 6:30 on a Saturday morning now has to be, gotten out of bed. I've gotten reports that he's falling asleep in class. I mean, this is not okay. This is not just my kid. You wait and see. That's all I can say. Wait and see. These kids that used to rattle around and make racket first thing in the morning, they change. Not all of them, but a lot of them do. Doing nothing is not okay. If 25 minutes is the best that you can do right now, then I say do it. I don't think it's the best we can do. I believe we can do a lot more than that. And I think that the creative thinking and the ideas, bringing more ideas in is the right idea. Diversifying the task force that is working on this is the right idea. And I think that waiting is the absolute wrong idea. I think, just because you don't see the illness or the problems when you are looking at what's an otherwise healthy teen, it's not okay to ignore what's invisible to you, okay? It's not okay to me either. something has to be done, I recommend that you do at least something now, and then get to 8:30 or later very soon, okay?
So,
you take another, you're going to switch the tape.
I want to switch to tape. I was going to make that suggestion. We're going to take just a couple minute break here to change the DVD. Okay, we're back. Why don't we go ahead and get started again? Dr. Freeman just stepped outside to talk to a media representative, but if that's okay with you, if we're good enough for you, all right. If we can serve the purpose, then we'll go ahead and get started. So please, if everybody can just pay attention, please.
All right, I guess we're going to get started back up here. Nate, keep this rolling. Got to get our sleep tonight. Nate Jacobson, 1470 Long Hill Road. I'll see if I can organize my ramblings. Feel like I'm following, I think it was cardiothoracic person that trains. Very pretty lady with a much better accent and voice than me, so I have a tough act to follow. I do feel that Guilford is really at a crossroads here. I've been in a lot of the meetings for a number of years. You guys have a better idea than me, but I've been there from the beginning. I'm guessing it's 3 or 4 years at this point. I'm of the belief that we are at a crossroads when you look at it kind of from above in the sky. I think it's enough talk about it and time for action. With that being the case, 3-4 years ago when I first looked at it, my first glimpse was an emotional glimpse in how would it affect my family personally. And my kids were all at elementary school 4 years ago. So naturally, I was against it, mainly because of the change and that it would change my schedule. The difficulties of a working parent that haven't changed now for the elementary family in simply moving it 10 minutes. I went to meetings to be well educated, to find out more about the research, and continue to tell myself to keep an open mind. I still have discussions, arguments with my wife. She is of a very different opinion on what should be done with it. I think we're at a crossroads that a lot of people have expressed something needs to be done on it. When I look at the time invested into it, the science behind it, and the benefits to a healthy start time, I like that phrase, it definitely makes sense to me. With that being said, I believe one of the words in the mission of the task force is consensus building. The task force wanted to build a consensus on this. Trying to look at the documents with a critical eye, it jumps out at me, this statement right here. The school day consists of instructional periods, lunch periods, and passing time. This was discussed at length. It was emphasized by the administration that a reduction in instructional time was not acceptable. I'm a big believer that consensus is reached through shared sacrifice. At the risk of having tomatoes thrown at me, I think everything should be looked at this as nearly everything has. I saw the uproar in the community on, I believe it was March 12th, with just the thought of looking at a restructuring of the middle schools in North and South. I agree with the board sentiment at that meeting that it's our responsibility to take a critical eye and look at that. That's been strongly considered, or not considered, but it's not strongly considered, but it's been considered. Multiple tiers on buses at a cost of, I believe the estimate was $200K to $500K, which my guess is a conservative estimate. I think it's going to be more expensive than that when it's said and done. Maybe some pointing in that direction is that nobody would bid on a 2-tier contract, that it could be more expensive than $5K. And additionally, this current proposal has got a potential cost, an estimate of $350K in a budget. I come here from 10 minutes ago, I'm a school teacher in Clinton, getting a text from a colleague that their budget was shot down for the second time. $350K isn't for this coming year, but when I read this, it's emphasized by the administration that a reduction in instructional time was not acceptable. Again, I'm a believer in shared sacrifice. If we're looking at that, I think we should look at the instructional time. When I read later that the high school is potentially losing 5 minutes of passing time, and to make that up, there's going to be additional 2 days in the contract, that struck me as very disingenuous. And I say that not out of disrespect, but I'll continue and then you can respond. I say that, I'm a school teacher, I'm a former administrator, I get the contractual obligations. I think there are more creative things that can be done with teachers' time than simply adding that essentially 5 minutes. Keep the contract time with the teachers the same, but the students don't have to come back. I know you're jumping to talk, so jump in.
People are entitled to believe what they believe, but that's not factually accurate. It's not part of the proposal that 2 instructional days get added to the year. That was something that Dr. Freeman tossed out as a possibility. That is not part of the task force's recommendation, and it is not part of anything that we would vote on. So I just want to clarify that.
Okay.
All right?
I am correct, it's mentioned in here, right?
I'm sorry?
I'm correct, it's mentioned in the task force interim report?
Mentioned.
Okay.
Yes, it is not part of the task force's proposal, and I don't think that it's anything that we would vote for, frankly, or vote on for that matter. Because it's a fair, look, the thought was if you reduce the time by 5 minutes, you maybe had the potential to add 5 times 180 minutes to the end.
900, roughly 2 school days.
Yeah,
I'm following that.
yeah, roughly 2 school days. But you can't, it seemed a little lack of equivalency to reduce passing time where presumably no instruction is happening and add 2 days of instructional time when presumably no passing is happening. So
that's exactly my point.
right. No, we got that. We got that.
Here.
So the task force's proposal is cost neutral. There is no additional cost.
Okay. With that being said, at the risk of touching the holy grail of academic time, I'm a former administrator. I get the need for instructional time. I was a little relieved when I heard the Greenwich proposal essentially reduces instructional time, and some other communities have gone with that route. My overall point, consensus through shared sacrifice. Thank you.
Craig Canaperi, 211 Three Corners Road. I was told by the other Craig that I should say something. I'm a Guilford parent. I'm also a pediatrician, and I direct the Pediatric Sleep Center at Yale. I have been involved with this issue since I moved to town 5 years ago, and am a member of the task force. And I've got to say, I've actually really appreciate the input and enthusiasm from the community tonight, as well as the simply epic bladder capacity of the Board of Ed, who seem to be able to make it through these meetings. I just wanted to address a few things that were brought up, just because this is what I do for a living. In terms of the science, I think as Mr. Haskell said, the science not being there for a time earlier than 8:30. I mean, certainly 8:30 is the ideal, but even in the AAP statement, they say that you have to take the community, what's going on in the community, into effect. It is what we call a dose response. Just as Dr. Moore was saying, the more extra sleep you get, the more benefit there is. And we know that there's a direct relationship between when kids have to start school and how much sleep they get as soon as they become adolescents. It's a different story with elementary school kids. So I do think any change is a good one if it is in the right direction, though more is better. I'm hearing from the community that perhaps one step would be better than 2, but it's a complicated decision that you have before you. One of the high school students who spoke, I commend you guys for coming out and speaking, is will a later start time result in a later bedtime? And I think that's a common conception, right? And the interesting thing when they've looked at this was that kids were actually going to bed a little bit earlier in Minneapolis, which was the largest school district, until I think Seattle just did it. And one of the first, they moved their high school start about 45 minutes later, and they found the students were actually going to bed a little bit earlier. Nobody's really sure why that is, but they think they're more efficient at getting their homework done. We actually don't know why people sleep, but we know what sleep deprivation looks like. your kids in the United States, about 90% of teenagers are sleep deprived. And I can't imagine any of us in the community would tolerate 90% of the kids not having enough to eat here, not having clean water. And we're in a fortunate position where we can do things about this in a town like Guilford. Sleep is a buffer for toxic stress, and it helps, to use a metaphor, feed the frontal lobe, which is the part of your brain that helps you make good decisions. And the frontal lobe is always keeping the amygdala in check. That's the part of your brain that deals with stress and threat. You see how stressed teenagers and students in general are all the time and so anxious. It's that lack of a buffer and that feeling that they're under a threat. We evolved this way because, you know, like 10,000 years ago, you might get eaten. But now students feel that degree of threat and stress all the time about things like trying to get to the school bus on time or getting their homework done. And that chronic stress is unhealthy. Our stereotypes about teenagers are largely related to the consequences of sleep deprivation. In the media, we think of teenagers as being lazy, surly, sleepy, anxious, even eating all the time. And we know those are actually consequences of insufficient sleep. I met Kenneth Dragstewart, who was the first superintendent in the US to make a change for this in Edina, Minnesota in 1996. And he talked about in the high school, when they changed their start time, all of a sudden it was calmer in the hallways. There wasn't trash in the hallways because kids weren't eating snacks and drinking Coca-Colas to stay awake. And a parent said to him, you know, I was against this change, but you gave me my child back, because he was so miserable when he was in high school. And I thought it was just because he was a teenager, because, you know, everybody knows teenagers are kind of miserable. But when he started getting more sleep, he became who he had been before. So I think we really want to give our kids a chance to succeed and a chance to be healthy. So that's why we're all here tonight. So thank you for your consideration.
Other comments? See, at this time of night, you have to wonder if people are getting up to leave or are they getting up to come and speak, right? I got faked out there. Sorry, yeah, please, come on up. Hi, come on up.
Lorraine Jordan, on Moppus Road North, 229. I have 2 children in high school. We just moved this year. We moved from a school district that had a later start time, okay? In Chapel Hill, North Carolina, East Chapel Hill, 9 o'clock. So it's been a really tough year. Sorry? 9 o'clock. It's been a really tough year for us. I'm sleep deprived. I just looked at the time and had a panic attack because it's 9:10 and we should all be asleep right now. Because in order to get up at 5:50, we need to be asleep right now at 9. And who wants to go to sleep at 9 o'clock? So I feel like I'm stressed in the morning and stressed in the evening. My son also has to walk to the bus stop. And he has to leave about 6:10 in the morning in order to get to the bus stop around 6:20 because he has to walk nearly, it's about a third to half a mile. So with his books. So high schoolers also have that on top of getting up early, is walking, you know, long distance to the bus stop. Many of them do anyway, or some of them do. And the other factor I wanted to bring up is my other son, who's a freshman, has special needs. So I know we're not a huge population, but that's a factor too, trying to fight the adolescence of special needs and the adolescence of time, trying to get a child to sleep, plus on top of that, you know, trying to deal with his special needs plus the sleep deprivation. Makes it doubly hard in the evening and in the morning. So I just wanted to say that I'm in favor of what is done. Actually, in our old schools, they actually reversed the high school starts at the time of the elementary, and the elementary starts at the time
Do they do that on a countywide basis, or is that, I know,
Yeah.
Chapel Hill and Carrboro are...
Yes, Chapel
right.
and Carrboro is combined,
Now,
right?
you may wonder why I know that. It's because our prior superintendent left
Yes,
us to
that's
go
right.
there.
That's
Dr.
right.
Purcell.
He's
But
our-
anyway,
he was our superintendent.
but is that the case for all of the schools in the county?
It's not a county-wide. Wake County, which is in Raleigh, is county-wide. And that's a huge school
And they
district.
all start at 9?
No, they don't start at 9, they start at 8:15.
Okay.
Chapel Hill Carrboro starts later, and that's only a small city. But
Okay.
it's a large population. Each high school there, and there's 3, has about 1,000 or 1,200 students. So it's a very big city school, but it did implement this quite a long time ago. And I thought it was very helpful towards parents.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Labadia Colon. I'm at 96 Tulip Tree Drive. I actually wasn't planning on saying something this evening, but I just heard comments over and over that I tend to agree with, that I felt, I don't want to say shot down, but they seemed like they were looked at and surveyed, and then didn't seem like an optimal solution. Dr. Freeman came to Calvin Leet as well as Baldwin, and by the way, thank you for the open communication. I think it's fantastic. You can find stuff. It was great to get that. It made me feel like a stakeholder. But where we came also from our school, we had elementary started first, then middle school, then the high school. And our former high school was just named in the U.S. News report. They're in the top 100. So I think that there's something to be said for the later start time. But it was brought up that that switch with starting elementary first was shot down in the surveys, and I think it was mainly because high schoolers were dependent on for childcare for the kids, which, again, I think it's that, collective coming together. We need to make sacrifices. I think there's a reason why we have aftercare. But I think one of the biggest things that stays with me is that this was brought up because we were looking holistically at the children, making sure that they're healthy, happy kids. And I think in addition to more sleep, I think we have so many things with anxiety, with stress, ADHD, executive functioning issues. I think a lot of this could also just be helped in the elementary level. If they did get out of school earlier, they could play more, because that's what we used to have. Our kids were home by 2:30, and they were playing outside. And our son was up till 7:30, 8 o'clock. So here it's in winter. We were the Eastern Standard Time, but on the western portion of that. So we had a little bit more sun. So here it's even so much earlier, especially in winter. So I think that's something to be considered, is all of the children, and holistically the children, is just that outdoor play time. We could really solve 2 problems if we revisit starting with elementary schools, middle school, and high school. That's all.
Anybody else? Anybody else would like to say anything? If not, I guess I'd just kind of put out a roadmap of what I think the next steps are. I think the task force is meeting next week.
We don't have a scheduled meeting, but we'll be meeting again soon.
It'll be meeting before we vote again on any proposal. What I'd suggest, perhaps the task force meet again to just talk about anything that came up here tonight and see if there are any thoughts about that. The task force meeting will be publicized and is obviously open to the public, as is any meeting. It's I think our hope on the board to try to vote on something before the end of the school year. It's not a promise, that's an aspiration, but we will, because some of these, we're sensitive to the implementation issue, and we want to not do anything too late if we do anything toward the start of the next school year, so that people aren't prepared for it. We understand that a lot of people are away in the summer at various times. We get all that. So appreciate all the work of the people that were on the task force. We appreciate really everybody. I've got 31 people who made comments tonight. I think that's probably the most of any meeting I can recall. And I think my hope at the beginning of the meeting was that we were going to see the complexity of the issue, but we were also going to see that there's no such thing as a bad idea or a bad position. They're just they're totally valid differences of opinion, depending on where various benefits are weighed in your own personal calculus. And I'm very pleased and always proud of the town of Guilford. When we come to these meetings, people were respectful of each other, even with those that they disagreed with. I think we got some good ideas to really think about a little further, and we'll try to keep working. But we will try to take action on a proposal, specifically the task force's proposal, well in advance of the next school year. So any board members want to make any observations?
I just concur that I appreciate everybody being able to come out and voice their thoughts and opinions and ideas, because that's what the intention, I think, was here, and that how respectful and how open-minded I think everyone came to this arena tonight. So thank you for that.
Okay. So with no other business, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.